Hi there. Welcome to Building Wealth Through Wholesaling. This class is a class on real estate wholesaling basics, and I am so excited to tell you about this and get you well on your way to making thousands of dollars every month. So let's get started. Okay, first of all, a little bit about me. I am a licensed broker in the state of Florida. I have been in the business for about 23 years now. I have participated in over 40 flips. I've managed dozens of our own properties. I've trained hundreds of wholesale agents and hundreds of new realtors. So I kind of have a little bit of a handle on what we're doing here. So with that being said, let's get going. First thing we're going to talk about is what is wholesaling. Okay, the actual definition of wholesaling is contracting a home with a seller, then finding an interested party to buy it. The wholesaler then assigns the contract with the buyer for a higher price, and they keep the difference or the profit. Okay, wholesaling is, we'll just call it the pawn shop of real estate. Okay, not everybody is going to need your services. There are a lot of people out there that do, but that's kind of how you have to look at it. It's somebody who needs cash fast and they want to get moving on it, and they're okay with letting their property go for a little bit less. A lot of times, or most of the time, these properties need repairs. Okay, so the next thing I want to discuss with you is why you don't need a real estate license. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of people will tell you that if you don't have a license, you are not allowed to wholesale properties, and there's nothing that could be further from the truth. So let's dive into this a little bit. It is in fact a felony to sell a property for someone else without a real estate license. However, in wholesaling, you are not selling a property. You are selling a contract. When you enter into a contract to purchase a property, you at that point have what's called equitable interest in the property. So therefore, you are able to sell your equitable interest in the form of your contract to another buyer for a higher price. And that is how you are able to sell or wholesale properties legally. So don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. It's not legal. It is perfectly legal. You just have to make sure that you have your contract in place so that you own those equitable interest rights. Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about is the types of real estate investing out there. Now, we all know the types of real estate. You have commercial real estate, you have residential real estate, which includes single-family homes and multifamily homes, condos, townhouses, those types of things, and land. You can actually wholesale land as well. Okay, there are two different types of investing strategies. There is fix and flip, and the fix and flip strategy is purchasing a property, renovating it, and selling it at a profit. Investors typically buy these properties at a discount because of the condition they're in. Okay, the other strategy that most investors use is a buy and hold strategy. A buy and hold strategy is an investment strategy to create passive income. This is where an investor purchases a property to create cash flow, and they typically hold them for a long period of time. So our next question, and one of the reasons why I created this class, is to explain to you why to choose wholesaling. There's a lot of reasons to choose wholesaling. One of the biggest reasons to choose wholesaling is it allows you to build up capital in a short period of time that will then allow you to move into a strategy such as fixing and flipping, where you can make a little bit more money. Now, the average wholesaler is going to close 3 to 7 deals every month, and depending on how well you negotiate, you can be making 5 to 10 grand average on each of those properties. So if you're out there hustling, you could really make about 70 grand a month. Not really anything to sneeze at. Okay, there's a couple other really good reasons to choose wholesaling. It's not a long-term commitment to a property. You can do this with very little money and bad credit. Don't let anybody tell you you can do it for free. There are expenses associated with wholesaling, and we'll talk about those a little bit later in this class, but it's very minimal investment in order to start wholesaling. You can wholesale with little to no experience. It can be done with very little risk, and you can learn how to do this very quickly. So you can get started right away with just a few tips and a couple $100, and you can turn that into several $1,000s every month. So let's look at a few things that you need to have in order to start wholesaling. Okay, first thing you need to remember is attitude is key when you're dealing with these types of properties. Okay, this is a numbers game, guys. You're going to talk to hundreds of people in order to find one property. And these people are not always going to be nice. You can't take that personally. And so if you are one of those people who cares what other people think of you, or you get a little hot-headed when somebody cusses you out for no reason, then you may want to rethink this and think about doing something a little bit different, because it's going to happen, and it's going to happen a lot. So you just need to keep that in mind. We get tons of hate mail every day. I get a lot of calls every day where people are just telling me, don't ever call me again. You're a crook, you're a scammer. And I mean, in all actuality, people, all we're trying to do as a wholesaler, all you're trying to do as a wholesaler is help people. For the most part, your clients are going to be people who are in a distressed situation, and they need your help. They need to get out of a problem, and you can provide a solution to that problem. Okay, the next thing you're going to need in order to effectively wholesale real estate is an email system. There are several that you can start out with. MailChimp is one that is free. There is ActiveCampaign, which is another very low cost system. Constant Contact, I'm sure there's probably 2 or 3 dozen others that work just as well. The key to using these systems when you are starting out is to create a template. That way, when you are building your buyers list, you can put your buyers in there, and then when you get a property, you just plug things into your template. It takes less than 10 minutes, and out the door it goes. A key to sending emails to your buyers is you don't want to bombard them with 10 emails a day. If you're getting that many properties, and you can do that by joint venturing with other wholesalers, if you're getting that many properties a day, you want to kind of back it down to maybe 2 emails a day, because what's going to happen is they're going to get email fatigue from you, and eventually they're going to just stop looking at the stuff you're sending to them because it's just too much. Okay? The next thing you're going to need in this business is contracts. Okay? And once you get these contracts, you need to know them inside and out. Take some time to learn them. Take some time to understand exactly what it is you're having people sign. They're going to ask you questions, and you need to be able to explain to them, Johnny on the spot, exactly what it means in order to get them to trust you enough to sign these contracts. Okay, your contract is the most important thing in a wholesale deal. Whatever is in that contract, that is your Bible to this deal, and unless you can get some changes in writing, that is what you abide by. If you do not abide by that, you are setting yourself up for some legal issues. Okay. And the next thing you're going to want to look into is skip tracing. There are a lot of ways to find some of these sellers online without having to pay for it. Skip tracing is relatively cheap. You can pay, depending on how many names you're skip tracing or how many leads you have, you can pay anywhere from 3 cents to 30 cents a lead. Most of the time you can get their name, mailing address, phone numbers, emails. There are all kinds of ways you can reach out to these people and talk to them, and there will be, I'll go over some things that you're going to be saying to them later, but this is just things you need to understand is how to reach out to them and how to get their information. So let's go over the components of what a wholesale deal is. You have 5 main components of a wholesale deal. You have your seller, you have your property, you have your contract, your buyer, and you have a closing agent. Okay, so let's first talk about the seller. Not all sellers are going to need your service. Okay, you need to know that going in. When you're calling a seller and they're telling you that their house is in pristine condition, doesn't need any repairs whatsoever, they don't have any problems you need to solve, they're not your buyer, and that's okay. Okay, it would be a smart idea as you get going to create some relationships with realtors and people of that nature that you can refer them to, and then they can, send you clients as well. So again, not all sellers are going to need your services, and that's okay. Just if you can't help them, if they want too much money for their property, move on to the next deal. Okay, the next element of a component of a wholesale deal is the property itself. Okay, properties that do not need any repairs and are not discounted enough for the rent to make sense are not the properties you want to be targeting. The properties that you want to target are sellers who are in a distressed situation or properties that are in need of repairs. There are lots of ways to find these properties. We'll go over some lead strategies, but that is what you're looking for. You want to find something where you can negotiate the price low enough to allow you to make a profit and allow your investor to make a profit as well. Okay, so now let's take a look at contracts. The contracts you're going to need in order to do a wholesale deal is a purchase contract. You will need a single family purchase contract, a land contract, a commercial contract, an assignment contract, a contract addendum, and a cancellation of contract just in case something happens during your due diligence period and you're not able to get the property assigned. You want to be able to get out of it. The next component of a wholesale deal is your buyer. Okay, this is your money maker, and there's a lot of coaches and gurus out there that are going to tell you that before you even start to try and wholesale properties, you need to build your buyers list. I can tell you from experience that it's a lot more difficult to build a buyers list without a property. So my personal preference and what I teach is find a property, the buyers will come. There are all kinds of ways to find buyers. You can find them through a bunch of different means, and you can reach out to other wholesalers and leverage their lists as well and learn a lot in the process when you're working with them. So find your property and then find your buyer. Okay, the next thing you're going to need in a wholesale deal is a closing agent. Okay, I recommend before you start finding your properties that you interview a couple different closing agencies. This is going to vary from state to state. Some states require an attorney to close properties. Some states require a title company. And what you're looking for is an investor-friendly title company. You can speak with other wholesalers in the area. They'll always give you some recommendations. And when you're talking to them, you need to ask a few questions. Okay, you need to make sure that they have knowledge of wholesaling. They have knowledge of double closings. They understand what a hard money loan is, and they understand what transactional funding. And for those of you who don't know what a hard money loan or transactional funding is, hard money loan is a loan that is made based mainly on the actual property and deal itself. It's usually a higher interest loan. Many times you can get the repair costs built into the loan. They are generally a 12-month term with a balloon payment, but that too can vary from lender to lender. Okay, transactional funding is something you will use if you are doing a double close. A transactional funder, they generally charge about 2%, and they will wire the funds to the title company for the front side contract. The money never leaves the title company. It goes into their account to show that it's there. As soon as the second side closes, it goes back to the lender. Okay, so when you're talking to these title companies, you need to ask them, do you work with real estate investors often? Are you familiar with wholesaling? And how often do you do double closings? Okay, if you find a title company that can answer those questions effectively and give you really good answers, then those are the ones that you want to work with. The next thing we're going to talk about is identifying a deal. We have two different deals we're going to be talking about here: fix and flip and buy and hold. So the first one is the fix and flip properties. Okay, so when you're first starting out with wholesaling, you want to make sure you've got a property that you're going to be selling quickly. And to do this, there's a few rules of thumb. And this is just until you get a little bit more acclimated to the system and how things work. So when you're looking for properties, you're going to be looking for properties that need cosmetic flips. Okay, and like I said, this is just for when you're starting out and you're not super familiar with everything. You're going to be looking for things that aren't major. Okay, if a property's going to need all new electrical, all new plumbing, a roof is okay. That's not super expensive to do, but you want to make sure that you're not picking properties and trying to sell your first flip or sell your first wholesale deal on a property that's going to need all new plumbing, all new electricity. You need to make sure that you are looking at properties that can be updated quickly. You need to make sure that you are looking at the competition. I'm sorry, I got distracted there for a second with my dog. You need to know which areas are up and coming areas, and you need to look at some of the comps in those areas that are retail comps, so you know which improvements that are going to need to be made to make that house sellable in that area. You don't want to pick a project that is going to be a huge project to start off with. It's going to be a lot harder to sell. Okay, you're going to be looking for markets that are up and coming, and you want to buy or you want to put under contract the worst house in a nice neighborhood. Those will generally sell quicker. Okay, and I'm telling you these things because I'd like to see you be able to close a deal or two in your first month, so you understand just how easy this is. Okay, you always want to leave room in these deals for your investor for unexpected costs. A lot of times people will get into a flip and they'll have to tear open a wall, and lo and behold, the whole thing is full of termites and they're stuck with something that's going to cost them an extra $10,000 to fix. And not everybody has that to put into these budgets. Okay, so when we're looking at a buy and hold property for an investor, financially you want to be able to, I believe the equation right now is about 1% every month in rent. So if you're buying a house for $100,000, you want to be able to rent that house for $1,000. Okay, so in order to kind of kill it in the buy and hold market, you need to find a market that's hot. In 2020, the best markets right now are Orlando, Florida, Tampa, Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Huntsville, Alabama, Houston, Texas, Cleveland, Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio, Chicago, Illinois, and Indianapolis, and Kansas City, Missouri. And when you're negotiating on these deals, you need to kind of take a look at the properties. While, Formica countertops might be fine for a rental, by adding granite, you can increase your rental income. So you want to take a look at some of that stuff and make sure that you're negotiating well enough to make this a slam dunk for your investor. Once you do that, it will be a lot easier to sell. There are less buy and hold investors than there are fix and flip investors, because the buy and hold is a lot less income every year. However, it is a long-term investment strategy. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your buy and holds. The next thing we're going to talk about is lead generation. Lead generation is what is going to drive your business. Okay, you need to find the properties, just plain and simple. So there are a lot of things, there are a lot of different ways to find leads, but the leads you're going to focus on are people who are distressed and motivated. And some of this comes through divorce. You've got out-of-state property owners who are looking to sell all the time, people who have tax liens, people who have code enforcement violations, people in the military that are being deployed or relocated, people who have filed for bankruptcy, people who have probate properties that they've inherited that have mortgages on them that, they have no way of paying mortgages on two properties. You've got pre-foreclosures. You have foreclosure auctions. You can look at MLS listings. You can look at for sale by owners. Hoarder houses. Houses that are just plain ugly and eyesores in the neighborhood. You can find those by driving for dollars. And there are many, many more techniques for this. I have addressed that in a lead generation class where I show you step by step how to find these. A lot of these things you can find for free, and others of these you can buy lists, have them skip traced, and then reach out to the people in that fashion. Okay, so let's talk about how you're going to find these sellers. A lot of times on the property appraiser websites, you can find phone numbers for these sellers. Okay, there are other ways to do that. You can Google them. A lot of times when you Google them, it'll come up with a phone number. If the property is owned by a corporation, you can look at the state's corporation registry. On that registry, I know in Florida, where I am, if you look at the annual reports and the amendments and things like that they've done for their corporation, sometimes you can find phone numbers and emails. You can also look for them on social media. That's kind of one of my favorites, because you pretty much can find everybody on social media these days and just reach out to them. Okay, when you're trying to talk to these sellers, you can reach out to them through mail. You can pick up the phone and call them, or you can send them a text. There are a lot of different programs these days where you can send a text, one of them being Text Line. It's very reasonable. I think it's about $15 a month for unlimited text, and you can text through there. I would advise, if you're going to be making phone calls, you use a Google Voice number. That way you're not getting calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the text line, same thing. That way you're not getting texts at 3 o'clock in the morning waking you up. So the next thing we're going to talk about is seller motivation. Okay, you're dealing with people who are having problems. Okay, they're not always going to be in the best mood when they talk to you. A lot of them are going through a divorce. Some of them have just lost a loved one. Some of them are going through foreclosure or a bankruptcy, and they are stressed to the max. And you need to be very understanding and empathetic to their situation. You need to build a rapport with them and get them to trust you in order to get them to sell you their property. This is a big key when you are working with these sellers, because if you just call them up and it's all business to you and you're not trying to understand what they're going through, then there's absolutely no chance they're going to sell you the property. So keep that in mind when you're talking to them. As long as you can build a rapport, you have a much, much better chance of actually getting the property under contract. Okay, when you can't come to terms with a seller, and this happens a lot, especially with people who are looking for a retail deal or have no motivation to sell, you can refer them to a realtor to list their property on the market. If the property is not in the best of conditions and you know that it's not going to sell with a realtor on the MLS for what they're looking for, you can refer them out to the realtor and then several months later reach back out to them, because by that time they'll have probably come to the understanding that, okay, I'm not going to get my price, maybe I should move forward with this other offer and know that I can close quickly and be done with this and not have to have people running through my house every other day just to look and disappoint me over and over. Okay, so a big key when you're working with these sellers is follow up. There are conflicting numbers out there. Some say 7, some say 11, but you need to have a certain amount of touches to these people before they start trusting you a little bit. And you need to be giving them information when you call them, just kind of checking in, try to be their friend a little bit. But eventually, if this is somebody who's going to sell and they're just kind of on the fence, if you are the one following up with them, then they are going to eventually sell to you. Most wholesalers will reach out to a seller once, possibly twice, and then not reach out again. And it doesn't work like that, guys. As long as you keep following up and put them on a 1-month cycle and get yourself a CRM, which is a customer relations manager. And what that is like a database where you can put all of their information in. Every time you have a conversation in there, you put notes, and then you call them up and, hey, how's your kids? Last time we talked, you said they had a big soccer tournament. How did that turn out? That goes a long way for building rapport with these sellers. And once you have that rapport, it's fairly easy to get the property under contract. Next thing we're going to talk about is evaluating a property. When you're evaluating a property, the first thing you need to do is know what the property is worth as a retail value. Once it's repaired and ready to go out on the market through traditional selling with a realtor, what's it going to be worth? Okay, once you know that, you can kind of work backwards into knowing what your offer is. Okay, every area is different. I know in my area, we try to get properties under contract for 65% of the after repair value or less. Or actually, we try to sell it at 65% of the after repair value or less. So you have to take that 65% and then subtract what you want to make on that property, and that's going to be what your maximum allowable offer is. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about rehab estimates. When you're first starting out, this is not something you're going to be an expert at. And you can do a couple things for this. You can go out and look at the house and bring a contractor with you to get an estimate. Some contractors charge for this, some do not. Or you can kind of ballpark it. I'm working with the investors I work with. I can tell you that no investor is going to come up with the same number. You're always going to have discrepancies, and it just depends on what kind of rehab they're going to do. Me personally, when I'm trying to do a rehab estimate, just to have a number out there to send as an approximate, I will use, for a property that just needs minor cosmetic repairs, $20 a square foot. If we're looking at something that needs a little bit more than just minor cosmetics, I'll use about $27 a square foot. And if I'm looking at something that needs a roof, a new kitchen, new bathrooms, new flooring all throughout, I'll use about $35 a square foot. And that usually covers what most of my investors are going to put into the property. And if you're a little bit higher, that's more profit for them and they're happy. Okay, your investors, as you're working through this, your investors are going to tell you, hey, no, there's no way I can spend that. It's going to cost me $80,000 to do this. And if that's the case, then that's probably just not the property for them, and just keep moving and find the right buyer. The next thing you need to be considering when making your wholesale offers is closing costs. Most of the wholesalers will pay the seller closing costs for them, and that cost will be passed along to your end buyer. So the average closing costs are between 2 and 5%. So when you are figuring out your offers and figuring out how much to charge, you need to keep in mind that once the investor purchases the property from you, they're going to pay an extra 2 to 5% on the front end, and then they're going to pay that again when they sell the property. So if you figure 5% for your first contract, where they're paying seller and buyer closing costs, and maybe 2.5% on the back end, you're looking at about 7.5% in closing costs that they're going to have to pay. So when you're figuring out what you're going to charge your investors and when you're negotiating with the seller, you need to keep in mind that on top of the rehab costs, you're going to have closing costs. If your investor is getting a hard money loan where they're making payments every month, interest payments, then you're going to have to take that into consideration as well. So just know your numbers when you are dealing with any kind of property, because you don't want to send a property out to an investor that's only going to make them $10,000 when they've told you that they won't look at anything that they're going to make less than 30. So you don't want to look bad to your investors. You want to look like you know what you're doing. So just keep those numbers in mind when you're doing your calculations. Okay, so now let's talk about pricing your deal. Okay, let's do a for example. Okay, let's say you have a property that's worth $100,000 and it needs $15,000 in work, and it's in an area where investors are purchasing at 65% of your after repair value. Okay, so with that being said, you would be able to sell the property at $65,000. Okay, what you're going to need to remember is if you would like to make $10,000 on that property, that means you must negotiate this property at a price below $55,000 in order to make it work for that investor. So let's say we have a property at $65,000 that needs $15,000 in repairs, so you're at $80,000. And we'll figure 7% closing costs all the way around. So you're at $85,600, so they'd be making about $14,400 on that deal. Now, if this is an investor who has told you that they won't do anything for less than $20,000 in profit, this is not a property you want to send to that particular investor. Now, if this is a newer investor that's okay with making just $10,000 in profit because they can get this done in 30 days and be done with it, then this is the deal you want to send to them. But you just need to understand your numbers before you add in your fees. Don't be greedy with your fees. There are plenty of properties out there, and if you have to cut your fee back to $5,000 on one deal, you may be able to increase it to $20,000 on the next. So just keep that in mind. This is like I said many times tonight, this is a numbers game, and if you're closing 3 to 7 properties a month, if you have to make $5,000 on one or two of them, that shouldn't really be that big of an issue for you. I have seen personally, I think our highest assignment fee was $55,000 on one deal. So they average out. Don't be afraid to make a little bit less money on one to get it done, because what's going to happen is you're going to create a loyal buyer for yourself who's going to continue to buy from you. So let's talk about the different types of buyers, okay? There are actually there's about 5 types of buyers, and I'm going to talk about one, and then we'll go into the others that are real buyers. The buyer I want to talk to you about first, we're going to call them the pretender, okay? And what this is, or who this is a wholesaler calling you up saying they're a buyer because they want to market your property and try and make some money themselves, okay? You can figure this out from them by asking questions and just asking them straight up, are you a wholesaler or are you an actual cash buyer? It's okay if they're a wholesaler. You definitely want to work with other wholesalers, especially when you're starting out. However, if they're going to be marketing your property for you, you want to make sure you put paperwork in place so that everybody is doing this legally and you guys don't run into any kind of problems. You can do what is known as a non-exclusive option agreement, which gives them a non-exclusive option to purchase, which means if they find a buyer, they can exercise that option, but it still allows you to market the property to other people and sell it prior to them bringing you a buyer. You don't have to check in with them first to see if they have a buyer. You can just sell the property and tell them, hey, it's gone, let's move on to the next one. So let's go over the other 4 types of buyers, okay? The first type of buyer, and this is the new buyer, okay? We call them the nervous newbie. Okay, these are buyers who are eventually going to buy from you, but because they're new, they're just a little bit nervous to pull the trigger. These are people who are going to need a little bit of hand-holding. They are going to be calling you with a lot of questions, and if you don't know the answer, you need to learn how to find the answer. And as long as you do that for them and you work with them, kind of hold their hand through the process, they will eventually buy from you. Once you can work them through their first couple deals, they will be very loyal buyers to you. Okay, the second type of buyer I want to talk about is what we call the looky-loo. Okay, this is a buyer who is going to call you every single time you send a property out. They're going to want to go look at it. And every single time they look at a property, they're going to find a problem with it and they're not going to buy. So once you can identify this type of buyer, answer their calls, but don't put a whole lot of time into it. You know, if you have a walkthrough scheduled for some of your other buyers, let them know so they can come and walk through. Don't make special arrangements to walk them through by themselves if they have proven to you that they've looked at every single property and not purchased one. Okay, the third type of buyer we're going to talk about is the overanalyzer. This is the buyer who is going to look at every single low-end comp they can find. They're going to call you over and over to tell you that you picked the wrong comps, you have the wrong rehab, you have that everything you sent them is incorrect and they think this, or the other. This is a person who is most likely never going to purchase from you. I have seen these people over the years many, many, many times, and not once have I ever seen them actually buy a property. They are too scared to actually move on a deal, and unfortunately they lose out a lot of times. And then, last but not least, you have your actual buyer. Okay, once you have identified your actual buyers, these are people who are going to look at your marketing material. They're going to pull their numbers. They're going to call you up and they're going to say, okay, I need to see this. You're going to get them in the property and you will have an offer and a deposit within a day for the most part, if it's an actual buyer. They are somebody who does this professionally. They know what they're doing. They know what their numbers are. They know what it's going to cost them in closing costs. They know what it's going to cost them in rehab fees. And these are the buyers that you want to focus on. Once you have 3 or 4 of these people who are buying from you consistently, and they will, you want to put them on a VIP list, and before you send out marketing to everybody, just shoot them a text and say, hey, I have a new deal coming over here. This is what it is. Do you want to take a look? Give them that special, that special heads up, because they will be loyal to you if you can keep providing them with the deals. So those are the buyers that you want to nurture the most, because they are repeat. And when I say repeat, I mean very much repeat. I have some buyers that buy 6 to 10 properties a year from us, and that's just how it works. We send them the deal ahead of time, and usually before we're even marketing it the next day, we already have an answer from them whether it's going to work or it's not going to work for them. Okay, so let's talk about some cash buyer resources. There are a lot of ways to find cash buyers. Okay, I'm going to tell you a few, and then I'm going to tell you my favorite. You can find cash buyers on the MLS. They're very easy to search. If you have a property that you're trying to sell and you have access to the MLS, you're going to do an address search for sold properties that sold for cash, and you're going to kind of pull a radius of about 3 or 4 miles, and then you're going to call those particular buyers to see if they're looking for anything new. Another way to do this is with a program called PropStream. You do not need to be a realtor to have access to PropStream. I do believe at this point they do a 14-day free trial so that you can test it out. They're fairly inexpensive, and you are able to pull comps for your property. So when you're trying to evaluate what the property is actually worth, you can find it in there as well. And you can pull a list of people who have purchased for cash within a certain amount of time in a certain radius of the property. So you can skip trace those people or look for them through social media like we talked about before, and call them up and see if they're looking. And my favorite way of finding cash buyers is completely free. You can find them through social media. And to do this, what you're going to do is you're going to be joining as many real estate investing groups as you possibly can. And all you're going to post is, hey, I have a property in 32825 zip code, or whatever zip code you're working in. Who's buying? And generally you're going to get a list of emails, half a mile long maybe, 10 or 15 people saying, hey, yes, I'm a buyer, I'm buying in that area, and they're going to give you their email address. Once you get their email address, because that post is your property, you want to delete those comments. You don't want people kind of hacking into your buyers list, okay, and stealing these people. But once you have that email address, you're going to want to reach out to them and kind of start building a relationship. There are a few questions, and we'll go over those in a few minutes, that you're going to need to be asking all of your buyers so that you know which ones you need to focus on and who's actually buying. Another way to find buyers is going to be through joint venturing with other wholesalers. Okay, the wholesaling community is huge. There are a lot of new people who have no clue what they're doing. There are a lot of veterans out there as well. And if you can get networked with some of the experienced wholesalers, you'll have a much easier time finding your buyers. You'll be able to utilize their list, make sure you have a non-exclusive option agreement between the two of you so that nobody is in violation of the law, and have them market to their buyers. And when you're doing this, understand though that you're going to be sharing that assignment fee that you have put on your deal. Now, if there's not enough room to share that assignment fee, you can ask them to add on. I don't necessarily advise this. The reason for that is your investors will be put on many different lists when they're looking for properties. They're going to be talking to a lot of wholesalers, and if they see a property from you that's $10,000 higher than somebody else, then they're going to buy from somebody else, vice versa. Okay, if they see it on the other wholesalers page and they're selling it for $5,000 more than you're selling it, they're going to come to you. But eventually, it kind of hurts both of you, because eventually when they're seeing it higher from somebody else, they're going to just stop looking at those emails. They're going to say, oh, well, they're not finding their own deals. I need to go directly to the source. So try and work out a deal with the other wholesalers where you're marketing at the same price, and you'll look a lot better with your buyers by doing that. So when you're marketing your deals, we've talked about email marketing. Okay, just a few tips. Like I said, you need to set up a template in one of those sites, MailChimp, like I said, being one that's free, Active Campaign, Constant Contact, Infusionsoft. They'll all allow you to set up templates. So when you're getting a deal, it'll take you maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Well, 10 minutes to start off, but eventually it can be done in minutes, where you're just plugging in pictures and immediately sending this out. What you want to do when you're marketing these properties, once you send this out, give it about an hour and then start looking at who's opening your emails. You're able to do that in those systems. If you see that somebody is opening your emails 3, 4, and 5 times, this is somebody who's probably interested in that property, and you may want to take the time to reach out to them and see if they have any questions you can help them with. Okay, you want to set up your VIP list like we talked about. Make sure you're texting your VIP people prior to sending out your marketing. And you also want to make sure you're not bombarding them with 10 to 14 emails a day, because it's just going to cause what's known as buyer fatigue. And eventually they're just not going to look at them anymore. They're just, they're going to miss too many of them, because there's just so many for them to open up. So let's talk about contracting the property. There's some things that are very important. This is the actual most important thing that you're going to deal with when you are doing wholesaling. Your contract is your deal Bible. What is in that contract is written in stone, and if you do not follow that contract to the letter, you are setting yourself up for legal action. So let's go over a few components that you need to really nail when you're doing these offers. Okay, first of all, your earnest money deposit. When you are putting down an earnest money deposit with the seller, you want to try and put down as little as possible. In Florida, where I am, it is a minimum of $10. Okay, and that's what is considered consideration, or valuable consideration. Without this EMD, you do not have a valid contract. A lot of times you're going to get some pushback with the sellers if you put $10 on your contract. I know we use $100 on our contract and we get pushback a lot, and one of the ways to overcome that is to add additional EMD at the end of your inspection period or your due diligence period. And at that point, if you have assigned the contract, then that EMD money or earnest money deposit money is going to be coming from your end buyer and not from you. So this is one way to kind of not spend as much money wholesaling, but you do need to make sure you have some money's put aside for deposits. Okay, especially if you're going to be working on multiple houses at a time. You want to keep it as low as possible, but you also want to be able to get the property under contract. Now, on the second side contract, when you're selling to your buyer, you want to be able to take in as much as you possibly can. You want to make sure that you make your deposit non-refundable with your end buyer, and you want to make sure that their EMD or earnest money is enough that it's going to hurt if they decide to cancel and walk away. Okay, somebody who is putting a property under contract to purchase is going to have a lot harder time walking away from $5,000 than they would walking away from $100. So keep that in mind when you are working with your buyers. This is, of course, a business decision for you to make in your business, but that is just something to keep in mind because it is critical that you get those EMDs in. Okay, assignability. Assignability is a very big thing in wholesaling. Assigning the contract means you are giving your rights to that equitable interest to another party for a fee. Okay? And in doing this, most times you are still liable if they do not close. I know in the FAR, which is the Florida Association of Realtors and Bar Association contract, there is a box that you can check that says assign and be released from all liability, and there is a box you can check that says assign and not be released. If you're dealing with an MLS property or a realtor represented property, you may get away with assignability, but you're probably not going to get away with assignability and being released from any kind of liability. Most sellers want to know who's going to be in charge and who's going to be responsible if something happens. You also want to remember, if your buyer walks and it's after your inspection period, then you are still on the hook to get that property closed. So that's another reason to collect as much earnest money as possible. Okay, your due diligence period is basically your inspection period. This is the time that you have to find a buyer to take over that contract. Okay, this is the time you have to do any kind of inspections you'd like to do. When we sell to a buyer on the back end, we do not allow them to have an inspection period. They are to inspect the property prior to putting the offer in. Most investors understand this theory or this strategy, and they're okay with it, and they'll take a look at what they need to do before they put their money down. Okay, this again is a business decision for you as a wholesaler. If you would like to allow them an inspection period and it doesn't put you past your due diligence period where you can get out of the contract, then by all means, if that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. But understand, once you've put that property under contract with an inspection period, you are now not able to market it to anybody else to sell. So keep that in mind when you're working with these buyers, as far as giving them an inspection period or not giving them an inspection period. So the next thing we're going to talk about is double closing. When you have a contract that you cannot get the seller to agree to allow it to be assignable, you can still sell your contract through a double close. And what this means is you will go to the closing table, your buyer will go to the closing table, you will close on the property, and then they will close on the property. Depending on how you have your contract set up, you can have the end buyer pay both sets of closing costs. However, you need that written into your contract for that to happen. If that's not written into your contract, you need to make sure that your assignment fee is going to be enough to cover those closing costs and still allow you to make a profit. Okay? If you end up in a situation where you are unable to close on the property, but you have to do a double close, you can use what is called transactional funding, which we spoke about earlier. There are a lot of transactional funding companies out there. They average about 2% interest on the money. It'll go to the title company, it will close your side of the deal, the second side of the deal will close, and then the money will go straight back to that lender where nobody ever touches it. It goes into the title company's account and then turns around and goes right back out. So, closings. Let's talk about closings and how we're going to get there. Once you have picked your title company and you have a signed contract with your seller and you have a signed assignment with your buyer, you're going to send your contract over to your title company or your closing agent. And there's a lot of wholesalers out there that just kind of leave it at that, and they let the title company do their thing and they wait. And a lot of times what happens with this is you have delayed closings. Okay, you have a title agent who has 30 closings and they have only so much time in the day. So if there is an issue that pops up, such as an estoppel letter for a homeowners association, or possibly a code enforcement lien that needs to be cleared before closing, you as the wholesaler can jump in and reach out to that homeowners association and get that letter for them. You can reach out to the code enforcement and try and negotiate down that lien if your seller is unable to get it paid and your buyer is not willing to pay it. These are just some of the things you can help with. I would recommend, once you start doing actual closings, you check in with the title company at least every 3 days to make sure things are progressing the way they should be progressing, and ask them, hey, is there anything I can do to help you? Hey, what's going on with this? Have you gotten these letters? Do you need me to make a phone call? Not only will that build rapport with your closing agent and create a much better working environment for them if it's things that they just don't have time to get to, it will also give them a little boost where they know they like to work with you because you're going to help and do what you can. And a lot of times some of your files can get prioritized that way because they know that you're easy to work with and you're going to do what you can do to help. And last but not least, getting paid. Okay, if you are not doing a double closing, you don't even have to show up. Okay, you are going to want to look at the closing statement the day before closing to make sure that your fees are on the closing statement, to make sure that your buyer doesn't have any surprises. You're going to want to make sure that your buyer has a copy of that closing statement, and you're going to want to speak to them the day before, make sure they are aware of how much money they are bringing to the table to get the deal closed. You want to make sure they don't have any problems, and when you're first starting out, ask them, hey, do you want me to be there? Most investors are used to doing this. This is how they do business. And they're going to tell you, no, you don't need to show up. Once all the paperwork is signed, the title company will then either write you a check or send you a wire, and you get to move on to the next deal. There you have it. That is the basics of wholesaling. I hope this information has helped you. You should be receiving an email in the next day or so with an invitation to join our private Facebook community. In that group, we will be helping each other. I will be doing, little trainings here and there with some videos. I do offer group coaching every Tuesday and Thursday evenings from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. And if you have any questions you'd like to ask, I can be reached at realtorronnie@gmail.com or through my website, www.wholelotofwholesaling.com. And there you have it. Thank you for watching my class, and I appreciate you. Have a wonderful day.